Hello, in today's video I'm going to show you how to make one of these lovely little wet bags. It's made from old towels and is lined with pool fabric. It matches the beach bag that I made in last week's video. If you want to make the beach bag too, I'll share a link in the description below. Right, so let's get started. Cut one piece of towel 12 inches by 10 inches and then cut 3 other pieces 12 inches by 4 inches. The 3 pieces need to be all different colours. Then cut one piece of pool fabric 12 inches by 10 inches and another piece 12 inches by 4 inches and then another 12 inches by 8 inches. And you will need one zip 14 inches long, or cut a piece of continuous zip to 14 inches long. And your cut pieces should look like this. Pin or clip 2 of your 4-inch pieces of towel together. Then sew together, taking a 1/2 inch seam allowance, back tacking at the start and the finish. Next I top stitch. So I push the seam allowance towards the green toweling and then I'm sewing about 1/8 of an inch away from the red fabric on the right side of the fabric. Back tack at the start and then sew about 1/8 of an inch away from the edge of the seam. Back tack at the end of the seam and clip your threads. Next, attach our zip and pull fabric to our remaining 4-inch strip of toweling. With the side of the toweling that you wish to be on the outside facing upwards and your zip facing downwards, so you want the teeth side of your zip facing down towards the right side of your toweling fabric. I just put a clip in each corner and then I take my pull fabric and I put that right side facing down. The right side is the shiny side and then we're going to clip all the way along. And before sewing, just check that you have got it all the right way round. Right, just going to explain a couple of things before we start sewing. The first thing is that you need 100% polyester thread to sew with. Don't use cotton because if you leave your wet swimsuit inside the bag, it's liable to go mouldy if you use cotton thread, but polyester thread is much less likely to go mouldy. Right, another thing is that it might be useful to use a walking foot if you have one. Don't worry if you don't have one. I didn't use one simply because this is broken and I'm waiting for a new one to come. But if you do have one, then use it. Also, a ballpoint needle would be helpful too. But again, if you don't have one, don't worry too much. Right, let's get sewing. Take over to your sewing machine and sew, taking 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. It's best to sew with your toweling fabric on the top and your pull fabric on the bottom. Remember to back tack at the start and the finish. And of course, remember to put your zipper foot on to do this. The eagle-eyed amongst you will notice that I have actually already sewn this seam, but I forgot to film, so I'm just doing it again to show you. The next job is to top stitch, which is very important when working with the pull fabric because it can easily get caught in your zip, and the top stitching prevents this. So I take about 1/8 of an inch from the edge, back tack at the start, and remember to keep pulling your pull fabric out of the way of the zip so you don't get it caught. Sewing to the end and then back tacking. Place our zip over the 2 pieces of toweling fabric with right sides facing and put a clip in each corner. And place the pull fabric over the zip with the right side, the shiny side facing down, and then remove the clips in the corner and also attach the pull fabric. And then continue to put your clips all the way along the top edge of the zip, holding the pull fabric, toweling and zip together. And then again, I always just have a little check to make sure I've got it all the right way before I start sewing. Now sew, taking 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, back tacking at the start and the finish. You'll notice on this one that I'm sewing on the pull fabric rather than having the pull fabric at the bottom, and you can see how the pull fabric is stretching, and at the end I'll end up with more pull fabric than I have toweling fabric. It is much better to sew the other way around. It's not too much of a problem because if there is a little bit at the end I can just trim it off later. You could use a walking foot to stop the pull fabric from moving about too much. So sew all the way to the end and then back tack and trim your loose threads. As with the other side, we now need to top stitch at the side of our zip. Again, remembering to keep our pull fabric out of the way, but keep pulling it over to the side so we don't get it caught up in the stitching. Back tack at the start and the finish. And sew a nice neat seam about 1/8 of an inch from the edge. As both the pull fabric and the toweling tends to stretch, you will probably need to trim off a few seams to make it level at this stage. Then we're going to clip the tops and the bottoms together but not the sides. So with right sides facing, pin or clip your toweling together at the top and the bottom. Next, place your remaining piece of pull fabric over the pull fabric side with right sides facing and clip at the top and the bottom, but leave the sides open. I also mark about a 4-inch gap, which we're going to leave open for turning the right side out on the bottom side of the pull fabric. Start by sewing the top of the bag together, taking a 1/2 inch or 1 centimetre seam allowance, back tacking at the start, and continue to sew all the way to the end, back tacking and trim any loose threads. Sew the top 2 pieces of toweling together, again taking 1/2 inch or 1 centimetre seam allowance, back tacking at the start and the finish. Next, sew the pull fabric together at the top, taking a 1/2 inch or 1 centimetre seam allowance, back tacking at the start and the finish. Then sew the bottom of the pull fabric together, again taking a 1/2 inch or 1 centimetre seam allowance, back tacking at the start and the finish. And remember that we need to stop and leave the opening when we get to the marks that we left. Before we sew the side seams, we need to open the zip to about halfway, or it will be very difficult to open once we've sewn the side seams up. Next, cut a strip of cotton fabric 2 inches wide and about 12 inches long. I'm using the end of my green towel, as it isn't toweling fabric, it's just a cotton fabric, and I didn't want to waste it. I haven't used the toweling fabric for this because it will be too thick to get through the sewing machine once it was folded over several times. So take your strip of fabric and fold it in half to mark the centre line, and then fold each side into the centre, ironing it as you go along, and then fold this in half down the centre line. Then take over to the sewing machine and sew down each side as close to the edge as you can, back tacking at the start and the finish. The next job is to insert the carry handle we've just made and close all of the side seams. First, trim your handle to the required length. Insert your carry handle on one side at the top edge above the zip, but about 1 inch below the top seam. You need to leave a little bit of the handle sticking out at the side, but make sure you put it the right way around, so you want the right side of the handle inside the bag. Put a clip on the opened end of the zip to hold it together, and then clip or pin down both sides, clipping the pull fabric and the toweling fabric together. Then sew down the sides, having the pull fabric on the bottom and the toweling fabric on the top. It is quite bulky because you've got a lot of fabric there. When you get to the zip area, back tack and then carry on sewing. Do the same with the handle and do exactly the same on both sides. Clip all of your corners, and if you want to, you can trim all your seams back. Now turn your bag the right way out through the gap we left in the pull fabric. Pull all your toweling fabric through the hole and gradually pull it all out until you end up with all your bag the right side out. You will need to push out the corners very carefully, especially as you've got the pull fabric as well to push out, so don't go and poke a hole in the pull fabric, but do push those corners out. I did actually end up having to go back and cut a little bit more off each of the corners because I struggled to get the corners out. And that's your bag finished, apart from sewing up the hole we left to turn the right side in, which we will do next. So fold the seam allowance under on the opening you left to turn your bag the right side out and clip it in place, and then we're going to sew it together using 100% polyester thread, taking a very, very small narrow seam, back tacking at the start and the finish, and then clipping off all loose threads. Thank you very much for watching. I do hope you managed to make one of these lovely little wet bags. If you haven't already, could you please like and subscribe? Thank you, and I'll see you next time.